Judge, the pact says that the gateway to disruptive criminal activity often starts with
unlicensed documents and relics. I know.
The 6th episode of Silo ends with what feels like a big reveal. It's been established that access to technology is limited, but the final shot appears to confirm that the rule doesn't apply to everyone. You also find out what Juliette's plan with the Pez dispenser was, if not what she's trying to accomplish with it. As that plays out, you get a detail from the pact that says the gateway to disruptive criminal activity usually starts with unlicensed documents and relics. And as she sets out to find out the truth about what happened to George, we get flashbacks to their time together to help develop a clearer picture of why he became obsessed with the silo's biggest questions. None of this is terribly surprising. With hindsight, you can see how they were emphasizing the lenses and camera references, and Holston's use of the flowers in front of his mirror. But what works about this reveal is that it only answers part of the question. Even when we see that room with the monitors that you'd have to imagine is in the janitor's closet Sims came out of last week, what does that even mean? He described the people behind that door as doing the most important work in the silo. Work that he claims keeps 10,000 people alive. But why and for who? Does Sims lead them as his father did before? Or is this just a small part of something bigger? Jules is trying to discover the truth, and she engages with the most intriguing relic yet at the end of the episode. Why is the idea of what the world used to be like something that people are not supposed to be curious about? And do the people who suppress that information all know what the truth is and why they do what they do? The episode opens with an intimate memory of Jules and George in bed together, and through a series of flashbacks, it shows us that he hadn't made much progress in understanding the answers to those big questions. Jules is thinking of him as gaining access to Doug Trumbull's apartment is taking a long time because apparently you need special keys to open an apartment that someone from Judicial lives in. Not wanting to wait any longer, she takes things into her own hands and grabs a crowbar to force her way in. You think that they're looking for clues as to why he would want to kill Marnes. But when Billings finds the Pez dispenser relic in the medicine cabinet, you realize that this is all part of Jules' plan. This is all going on at the same time as the forgiveness holiday Bernard was talking about. We don't get a direct explanation of how that works, but we do see a sign here, and it reads, "In light of recent incidents, and in the spirit of goodwill, community, and commerce, citizens are encouraged to let go of past grievances, to travel beyond familiar levels, to see old friends, to give gifts, and to spend credits in the marketplace where crafts of all types can be acquired." We also get the sense from other conversations that there's a type of immunity that applies, that people can come clean on things that they've done. But again, this isn't explained in detail, so it's not really essential to what's happening. Back at her office, Jules tries to look up the Pez dispenser in the Relic's database by entering the description yellow plastic blue handle. The search comes back saying that there's insufficient data. And I think this is funny because I had been wondering why they chose this specific relic. It's not something that I remembered from the books, and I wondered why they made this specific choice. And the best I could come up with is that most people who are of a certain age in our culture understands what this thing is, but it would be really hard to describe it or understand what it was for if you didn't have that context. And I think this search kind of underlines that, which is pretty satisfying. We see that a porter brought her a note from recycling. It says, "Didn't find what you were looking for, I'll let you know if that changes," and she doesn't say anything about it and goes the extra step of destroying it after she reads it. Paul Billings arrives at the same time, and we get this great little detail about him, finding out that there is a pack competition to find out who knows the most about it, and that he's won it 4 times, which is more than anyone else. I wasn't really sure what to make of this character early on, as he didn't play a big role in the book series. But based on these small details that they're adding to his story, and the way this actor's bringing him to life, he's fast becoming one of my favorite new characters. She explains to him that she wants to do her own investigation into the Pez dispenser, and she thinks she found a way to justify that through the pact, but through him she finds out that if she wants to do it that way, she has to go to Judge Meadows and get approval, and he says that she doesn't interact with many people these days. They go there anyways, and they meet Sims, who's there waiting out front. The judge says she's not feeling well, and that she wants to get this over with quickly, and you get the sense that there's something wrong with her, but it isn't clear what it is. Both her and Sims look surprised that the relic was found in Trumbull's apartment, which tells us that they think that they would have known about it before if that was true. Sims explains that Judicial knows more about relics than what's in the sheriff's database. He points out in a somewhat threatening way that he knows that the watch she wears is registered to George, who's a person that she said had been murdered. She claims that working with Holston helped her to see that his death was actually an accident, and we should remember here that in the last episode, before he killed him, Sims brought up the fact that Trumbull had made a mistake when dealing with George. Even though Sims makes it clear that he doesn't believe that the Pez dispenser belonged to Trumbull, he does tell Jules he thinks a relic investigation might be a good idea, but that she needs to take Billings with her since he knows more about the pact. In typical Jules fashion, she tries to ditch him immediately, and he makes it clear that now that she's on Sims' radar, they'll be watching her everywhere she goes. It'll either be his guys or the Whispering Friends of the Silo, so he needs to be with her at all times. She's not exactly on board with this, but she realizes there isn't much that she can do about it, and confides that she knows a guy that's been busted with relics and owes her a favor. That turns out to be Patrick Kennedy, and he turns out to be afraid to talk about relics at all. He says that in his experience, people with badges doing things for personal reasons tend to get people hurt. Under pressure, though, he does eventually give them a name. Back in his office, Sims examines the Pez dispenser. He finds it right away in a search in their database, and finds out that it is pre-silo, but there isn't much else on the computer. Then we learn he also has a giant vault of relics behind his desk, and volumes of something that look like journals. They look very similar to the books that the mayor had in her office. Once he opens that up, you see a lot of intriguing stuff on those pages. To circle back to my point earlier about why the Pez dispenser was a funny thing to use for this, I thought it was great how the person who was charged with explaining this filled out the description. Under function, it says top bends back to reveal central internal pillar. Can raise then reposition and top closes. It's a pretty good job if you have no idea what a Pez dispenser does. I also noticed the date in there. It says that it was first retrieved 7/16/00. I don't know if that really gives away anything, but it's something to take note of. I mean, we know that the rebellion was supposed to be 140 years ago. Does this number indicate conclusively that this is something that was written before that happened? Probably not, but I feel like it's at least possible. He flips through some of the other pages, and then at the end, he finds a report from a confidential informant saying George had this relic, but when they went to search for it at his apartment, they couldn't find it. We do get a lot of flashbacks where we get to see Jules and George together, and there are some interesting details mixed in there. It seems like her stealing IT's shitty tape, as she likes to describe it, was a whole caper that she pulled off with George's help rather than the requisitioning story she's been telling, which involved distracting dogs with bacon and a lot of running, apparently. This comes out in a conversation where she doesn't understand why he would take such risk to have all of these relics, where he points out the risk that she took to get this tape. She explains that she did that because the tape saves lives, and that she was taking the risk to protect everyone, not for selfish reasons. So she doesn't get the idea behind the relics, because she doesn't see the point of risking getting sent to the mines or getting sent outside for things that you don't even really know what they are. He has an effective counter for this, saying if these things aren't worth risking our lives for, why do they make it a risk to their lives to have them? This is very similar to what Allison said to Holston back in the first episode. The bottom line is that they don't know. George believes that these were all tools at one time, and he's going to use them as clues. And that's how we get to a discussion about the biggest questions about the silo. He also gives her the watch, which is a legal relic, and even though she jokes about it, you can tell that she loves the gift. This turns out to be very important because this is something that people identify when they see it. First Holston, and then later Sims. There's another conversation where he talks about history just being the traces of a whole lot of people over a whole lot of time. He asks her if she ever thinks about the world outside the silo. And again, she defers to this idea that she's the one that keeps things running so that dreamers like him will stay alive. And at that point, she shows him that she fixed the watch, and he learns that she had to make the tools herself. Remember, she does like to fix things. That's an important part of who she is. And then she awkwardly tries to say she loves him without saying it, and that turns out to make it an even more touching moment. So what does George think is the biggest question about the silo? I mean, he thinks there's quite a few of them. What's outside? What's beyond the sensor? Beyond what they can see on the screen? Why are they there? How long have they been there? And how much time do they have left? When pressed on what the biggest one is, he goes with, what if everything you know to be true, everything you've been told by the people you love was in fact just one big lie? And this is probably something that Jules wasn't ready to accept while they're having this conversation. But the further she gets into this investigation, the further she gets into her tenure as being sheriff, you can imagine that she's starting to think about this a lot more. Back in the present, they follow up on the name they got from Patrick Kennedy. It takes them to Regina Jackson's apartment. She also notices the watch right away and tells Jules that it belonged to her boyfriend. It becomes clear in this conversation that she had a relationship with George, and it didn't end well as he moved on to mechanical. And she enjoys explaining how bad of a person he was and how he used her to buy his relics. She explains that she's already talked to Judicial, that she's already told them all of this information, and that makes it clear why the investigation of his death was on their radar. She figures out that Jules was likely in a relationship with George as well, and takes every chance she gets to explain how she figures that he also used Jules for his plans. She twists the knife on their way out, asking if she believed it when he said that he loved her. And Billings picks up on the fact that Jules is visibly shaken. When they get back to the station, Sims and Bernard come in to confront Jules about the relic. They have the same confidential informant interview that points to George having it, even though they couldn't find it when they searched his place. And now it magically shows up in an investigation that she's leading, which could suggest that she had something to do with that, according to Sims's point of view. She denies ever seeing it before. And when Sims starts to accuse her, Bernard actually saves her by bringing up the idea that if Trumbull was the one who searched George's apartment, then it's at least possible that he could have taken the relic home with him. Bernard still favors the official story that Marnes and Johns died of heart problems after walking the silo, and thinks that digging into this further may undermine the stability of the silo, and he ends the discussion there. After they leave, Billings expresses some concerns about the way that she put this together. He has a family, and if this had somehow come back on him, he could have been sent to the mines or sent outside. And while we're not exactly sure where his allegiances lie, he has this connection to Judicial that we can't really overlook. The way that he just asked her to be honest seems pretty sincere. Like, he seems like the kind of guy who's just trying to make the best out of his situation. And she makes it plain that she can't commit to that. When he gets upset, she turns the tables and exposes his secret, the thing that she's noticed about him, that he has the syndrome, and how that disqualifies him from having the job he does, and essentially undermines everything he says about upholding the pack for the greater good. An interesting detail here is the way that she interprets what he says is him calling her dishonest, while he was really saying that he only wanted her to be honest with him going forward. He's trying to build trust. This is something that she doesn't appear to be capable of. And when he brings up the idea that everyone agrees that the reason Marnes and Holston were so good together was that they looked out for each other, she says, look where that got them. It's all pretty harsh when you think about it, and that's exactly what he does. He heads home, and I don't think there's much else that he can think about at this point. He's very stressed out about the syndrome conversation. She's not wrong when she says this disqualifies him from holding the job that he has, and that lying about it is a big deal. We see her walk through the cafeteria where she runs into Lucas again, and this time he's waiting for her. It's a cloudy night where he can't see the stars, but he showed up anyway, and that leads to a funny back and forth about how bad he is at talking to women. As painful as that is, she does smile, and even though she says it was not with him, it was at him, you still think about what Walker said about George making her smile, and basically that was how she knew there was something real going on there. At the same time, Billings heads home, and you see him with his wife and child. Behind closed doors, he's shaking much more, and you get a sense of what he has to lose if people find out about his condition. The 4-time champion of the pack competition is lying and committing all kinds of crimes in the process of trying to take care of his family. You hear him say, "I'm thankful for you and Claire. I can't imagine life in the silo if I were all by myself." And then it cuts to Juliette in her bedroom alone. When she can't sleep, she goes for a walk and calls Walker, telling her that it's time to come home. Her plan is to turn the badge in the morning and resign. After talking to Regina, she doesn't believe in George anymore. And Walker asks her if she went up there for him or because it was the right thing to do. She responds that he's not the person she thought he was. And Walker counters, "What kind of person are you? The man you love was murdered, and now you're saying it's a waste of time to find out why." And she brings up the fact that she doesn't leave her shop anymore, before saying that she's welcome to come here and join her, or she could just finish the job, right? And that sends her back to Regina's place, where she calls her out for being the informant. Regina claims that she didn't give up George to Judicial, but then clarifies that they actually come during the day and ask easy questions. The person that she did give him up to is referred to as the man who knows everything, and he comes at night. She never makes it plain who this is, but you can tell that he scared the crap out of her. You can see signs that she's still paranoid all this time later, and she explains the threats that were leveled against her, saying things like every name she gave up would be less days her mother would have to spend in the mines. Whoever this person is has power and is able to exert that to get information that they want. Jules protests that George is dead because she gave up his name, and she counters that he's dead because he wouldn't give up the hard drive. And she says she never saw what was on it, and I tend to believe her. She does say that he gave her something, and because of that, she now has nothing. And when Jules asks what she traded for the hard drive, she does give her a book that he got from his mother and her Aunt Gloria that had been passed down for generations. Judicial never found this because it was hidden in her doormat, and I guess since they were looking for the hard drive, they wouldn't have imagined it being there. She claims that this is from before the silo, and warns that it's the kind of thing that will get you killed. When she goes back to her apartment, she finds out it's a travel guide, Amazing Adventures in Georgia, and the inscription inside says Gloria and George. This clearly looks like something that exists in our world. Inside, she sees forests and people whitewater rafting, animals, and while she's looking at that, we see why Holston told her to double the flowers in front of the mirror, which she didn't do. As the shot pulls away, we see her on a monitor where two men discuss waking him up because he has to see this. And now we'll have to wait till next week to find out what's going on there. I really like the way they use the watch as a sort of universal symbol that spans the whole season. Seeing its origin here and how Jules' tendency to want to fix things added so much personal value for her on top of the inherent value that comes from it being a gift from the man she loved. Of course, the reveal of the cameras is a big step forward in the larger story, but the reveal that George doesn't appear to be the man she thought he was has a massive impact on Jules' perception of reality. There's a nice parallel with how this object takes on so many different meanings depending on who sees it, and how that relates to this idea of truth. Jules had a very specific question that she wanted to find the answer to. What happened to George? And because of who he was, the pursuit of that is leading her to places that she would have never gone to on her own. And we watch in real time as the meaning of the truth she's looking for evolves. What will she find? What's going on with all those cameras? Are they talking about waking up Sims, or is there another character behind that door we haven't met yet? When Regina was talking about the man who knows everything, I couldn't tell if she was referring to Sims or not. He is a known agent of Judicial. The volumes of books he has with the relics in his office are interesting too, because they obviously contain information that would get normal people sent outside. The Georgia Travel Guide is a funny way to learn about what the Earth used to look like, and it's wild to think how it contains so many things they wouldn't have any idea, wouldn't be able to imagine, and how it's only from a relatively small part of the planet compared to what's out there. The last few minutes of the episode were tense and the payoff landed, and now I can't wait to see where the show goes next. I mentioned last week that there are a lot of exciting elements that have been added to keep book readers guessing, and that continues to be true this week. None of this feels like a divergence from the core story, but they have managed to develop a situation where I can't say for sure what will happen next, and that's exciting. Now that we're in the back half of the season, I might do a video that discusses some of the specific changes from the book to show, so stay tuned for that, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.